Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. When a person humiliates you in public. The worst mistake is to treat it like a private misunderstanding. In this story, the red flag was not just that she said no. It was that she needed an audience for it. If somebody turns your vulnerability into a performance, do not waste time arguing with the show. Step back, document everything, and let their character keep talking. By the time Camille Rain said no to me, most people in our lives were already calling her my fiancée. We had chosen a date, toured 2 venues, and spent 6 months arguing over napkin colors like that was a sign of maturity. I had the ring in my coat pocket anyway, because Camille said a woman deserved a real proposal story, not just paperwork and planning. The wind off Lake Michigan was sharp that evening, the kind that slips under your collar and makes you feel underdressed no matter what you spent. I remember thinking my hands were cold from the weather. They were not. They were cold from trust. Before this gets worse, tell me this in the comments. If you plan a proposal and your partner cared more about the audience than your heart, would you still go through with it? And if stories like this pull you in, share and subscribe for more real relationship drama like this. We were standing in the courtyard at the South Shore Cultural Center in Chicago in late October, with string lights clipped along a rented arch and both our families pretending not to stare too hard. Somebody's aunt had brought a foil pan of candied yams because black families do not gather empty-handed, even when there is catered salmon trying to act important on the buffet table. A violinist Camille hired from a wedding site was sawing through a love song near the fountain. My mother's best friend, Miss Trina, kept dabbing her eyes before anything had even happened. I should have taken that as a warning, too. Too much theater was already in the room. Camille loved presentation, the way some people love oxygen. She noticed hems, chipped polish, dusty baseboards, weak handshakes, cheap pens. She could spot a fake designer bag from across a restaurant and would tell you so in the parking lot before dessert even settled. She was 33, beautiful in a carved, deliberate way, always polished, always scented like orange blossom and something sharper underneath. She ran a small event styling business and talked about aesthetics as if they were moral choices. People treat you how you package yourself. She used to say, adjusting a centerpiece or my collar with the same exact fingers. I was 36 and made my living tuning and restoring pianos across the south side and western suburbs. Churches, public schools, funeral homes, community theaters. Sometimes rich folks in old houses with bad insulation and portraits that watched you from the wall. My job required patience, a good ear, and a tolerance for being invisible while other people made meaning with sound. I kept a tuning fork in my shirt pocket and cinnamon toothpicks in my truck console. I like my coffee dark, my work steady, and my life without unnecessary witnesses. Camille said, I thought it was too small. I said I thought in real numbers. We called that balance until it turned into contempt. We met 3 years earlier in the basement fellowship hall of New Mercy Baptist after a repast. I was there to look at the church's upright piano because the middle register had gone flat. She was helping her cousin gather silver chafing dishes and folding chairs, wearing all black and white sneakers under a dress too expensive for a church basement. I watched her reorganize the dessert table because the cookies looked defeated beside the peach cobbler. She laughed when she caught me watching. You fix pianos? She asked. Only the ones with good intentions, I said, and she smiled like that answer had earned an interview. In the beginning, Camille made me feel sharpened. She upgraded my jackets, replaced a cracked lamp in my apartment, made me stop apologizing to waiters for sending back cold food. When my truck smelled like motor oil and felt old, she tucked a cedar sachet under the seat and said, You work too hard to carry around a smell like struggle. There was love in some of that, I think. There was also editing. She did not only want me to improve. She wanted me translated into a version she found easier to present. I saw it and kept calling it care because I liked how proud she looked walking beside me. My people liked her from a distance and worried up close. My sister Dana said Camille asked questions like a loan officer. My uncle Vernon, who had driven city buses for 28 years and distrusted anybody too polished, once watched Camille inspect a menu at a diner in Hyde Park and muttered, "That woman is never in a room. She is actually standing in." I laughed it off. I was in love, and love makes you turn warnings into personality notes. Camille's mother adored me because I was dependable. Her younger brother liked me because I fixed a keybed on his keyboard for free. I mistook usefulness for belonging. The proposal was never my idea in that form. I wanted to ask her at home after dinner, maybe with just music and candles and the old Lionel Hampton record she loved when she was in a tender mood. Camille said no woman should have to explain a quiet engagement to people who had supported the relationship. It should look like a blessing, she told me. It should feel elevated. Elevated meant rented arch, photographer, family, and a lakefront view. I could have said no. I did not. That was the first major decision I made against my own nature, and I made it because I wanted her to feel cherished in her language. I spent 3 weeks planning details I did not even enjoy. I coordinated with her cousin for timing, booked a violinist, reserved the courtyard corner, pressed my suit twice, and picked up roses from a florist near 79th. The ring was a classic oval diamond in a simple setting, not small, not foolishly extravagant. I paid cash because I had been saving since winter. On the morning of the proposal, I tuned a spinet piano at an elementary school in Auburn, Gresham, and the music teacher asked why I kept smiling to myself. I said I was hoping tonight would mark the start of my real life. I still hate that sentence. The evening opened beautifully, which is one reason humiliation leaves such a clean cut. The sky was copper and gray. The lake looked like hammered steel, and the violinist actually knew how to play without drawing attention to himself. Camille arrived in a cream coat with gold buttons and heels too thin for the stone. She looked around before she looked at me, taking inventory of candles, flowers, guests, angles. I thought she was moved. Now I know she was assessing the production. Her mother squeezed my arm. Dana stood off to the side with her mouth set in that way that means she already disliked something she had not yet named. When I got down on one knee, I heard everything at once. Wind against fabric. Somebody's bracelet clinking. A far-off siren. The tiny click of the photographer adjusting position. I opened the box and asked her to marry me. It was a simple question, the kind people have been asking forever, without needing special effects. Camille stared at the ring first, then at me, then at the people around us. Her face changed in stages. Surprise, disappointment, calculation. She gave a short laugh I had never heard before. Then she said, "Clearly enough for everybody there." No, queens do not take less than they deserve. Nobody moved right away. That was the worst part. Silence can be a crowd too. My knee still hurt against the stone, and for 1 second I honestly thought I had misheard her. Then I saw Miss Trina lower her napkin. I saw Dana close her eyes. I saw Camille's friend Monique pull in a breath that sounded almost pleased. I could have stood up and argued. I could have asked her what less meant in front of everybody. I chose not to because my late father taught me never to wrestle in public with a person already performing. I rose, shut the ring box, and said, "All right." I walked past the candles and the violin and the salmon and all those sympathetic faces that did not know where to land. My chest felt hollow, not hot. People imagine public humiliation as rage first, but mine came as numbness, like my body had turned the sound down to survive itself. In the parking lot, the air smelled like wet leaves and cold metal. Dana followed me, carrying my coat because I had forgotten it on a chair. "Do not explain this for her," she said before I even got my keys out. I told her I was not planning to. At that exact moment, I still thought there might be an explanation worth hearing. By the time I got home to our apartment in Hyde Park, the first clip had already reached me. Somebody had posted 12 seconds of proposal, trimmed so that my question barely existed, and Camille's line landed like a punchline. The caption called it a lesson in standards. The comments were split between people praising her self-worth and strangers insulting a man whose face they could not even fully see. I sat on the edge of our bed, still in my suit pants, and watched my worst moment become content. That was when shame finally arrived. Not because she refused me, because she let the room own it first. Camille came home around midnight, quiet as if we were roommates sharing an awkward lease instead of two people standing in the wreckage of a planned future. She set her keys down, took off her earrings, and did not apologize. "You embarrass yourself," she said, looking at her reflection in the microwave door. I laughed once because it was either that or break something. "I embarrassed myself?" I asked. She turned, crossed her arms, and said, "Leon, that ring was not what we discussed. That setting was basic. And you know I wanted something meaningful, something that matched what we are building." We had never discussed rejecting me like a panel judge. The next morning she was gone. Not forever, not yet, just strategically. Half her clothes were missing, her makeup train case too, and the velvet boxes where she kept event ribbon samples. On the kitchen counter, she left a note in her square handwriting. "I need space from your anger." My anger. That sentence sat there beside the sugar bowl like a planted flag. I made coffee and did not drink it. The radiator banged its usual complaint against the wall. Outside, the 55 bus exhaled at the stop. Ordinary sounds have a rude way of continuing when your private life has just split open. For 2 weeks, I spent too much energy trying to make her behavior make emotional sense. I told myself she panicked. I told myself public proposals can pressure people. I told myself maybe the quote was performative but not sincere. Love will hand you absurd tools and call them hope. I answered 3 calls from her mother, all of them cautious and incomplete. I ignored 7 texts from Camille because each one sounded like a branding memo. I need time, need clarity, need alignment. She never wrote, "I am sorry." She never wrote, "I hurt you." She wrote like she was revising a contract and waiting to see whether I would accept new terms. The first practical sign of trouble showed up in a plain white envelope from our bank. I almost threw it in the junk pile because Camille usually handled statements from a joint account we use for wedding deposits and household bills. When I opened it, the balance was lower by nearly $11,000 than I expected. At first, I thought there had to be a clerical error. Then I saw a series of transfers to an account under her business name, Rain's Occasion House. My stomach dropped in a cleaner, colder way than it had at the proposal. Public disrespect wounds your pride. Missing money instructs your nervous system. I called her once, and she answered on the 4th ring like she had been waiting for performance of concern. "That money was for our future," I said. "It still is," she replied. I moved it temporarily to cover production costs for a launch. If my business scales, we both win. I asked why she had not told me. She sighed the way she used to sigh when I parked too far from an entrance. Because every time I talk to you about expansion, you start sounding scared. Scared, not responsible, not blindsided. Scared. I hung up and sat at my workbench staring at a loose hammer from an old Baldwin upright, my hands trembling around wood and metal. That afternoon, I went to Reggie's barbershop on 71st because I needed a place where people said plain things. Reggie had known me since I was 19 and was trying to grow a beard that only respected one side of my face. The shop smelled like talc aftershave and hot clippers. Men were arguing about the Bears as if civic disappointment were a religion. Reggie took one look at me in the mirror and said, "Who made you swallow nails?" I told him enough for him to understand the outline. He did not give me slogans. He only said, "Any woman who needs witnesses for disrespect is teaching you something. Write it down." I began writing everything down that night. Dates, transfers, screenshots, the clip, her texts, our prior conversations about money. I created a folder on my laptop and a manila file for paper copies because grief makes me old-fashioned. The next morning, a bride named Kendra called my cell asking whether the custom floral wall for her December shower was still happening. I asked how she got my number. She said it was on her invoice beneath Camille's logo as Operations Contact. I had never seen the invoice. When I told her there must be a mistake, she went very quiet and then said, "So who exactly is handling this event?" Kendra emailed me the contract. My name sat there under a title I did not hold. paired with my phone number and our old apartment address as business correspondence. There were more surprises in the attachments. A rental truck reservation in my name, a linen order listing me as guarantor, and a deposit schedule mapped against payments I had never approved. I read the documents 3 times, hoping the facts might soften under repetition. They did not. Camille had built portions of her business on the assumption that I would show up, fix gaps, pay overages, and lend my reliability without formal consent. I was not just a fiancé. I was an infrastructure. That weekend, her cousin Rochelle asked if we could talk at Peaches on 47th, the diner with the noisy coffee cups and sweet grits that tasted like somebody cared. Rochelle was the kind of woman who wore clean sneakers with church dresses and never wasted a sentence. She stirred lemon into her tea and said, "I stayed out of it because I thought y'all were grown. But Camille has been talking like your proposal was a test." I felt my shoulders lock. A test of what? Rochelle looked at me hard. Whether you could rise to her. That's how she says it. Like love is an audition. Rochelle told me Camille had been complaining for months that I was too comfortable, too modest, too rooted in worker thinking. She wanted a husband whose life was photographed bigger than it felt. She kept saying you had good bones but not enough appetite, Rochelle said, visibly disgusted by her own repetition of it. Good bones. I laughed again, and this time the sound scared me. Rochelle slid her phone across the table and showed me a group text I was never meant to see. Camille had written, "If he does that little ring in front of my family, I cannot fold. Queens do not lower themselves on camera." On camera. She planned the line. I went back to the apartment and pulled every binder from the hall closet. Wedding venue pamphlets, catering quotes, sample table runners, church premarital worksheets we stopped filling out after the 3rd session because Camille said the pastor focused too much on communication and not enough on vision. Beneath those was a slim accordion file labeled Fall Clients. Inside were printed contracts, handwritten balances, and receipts for purchases billed to cards I did not recognize. My name appeared enough times to expose a pattern. She had attached me to her business anywhere steadiness was needed and hidden me anywhere risk might land. That discovery hurt in a different place than betrayal. It hurt my judgment. I asked Camille to meet me at a coffee shop in Bronzeville. Public enough for calm, quiet enough for truth. She arrived 20 minutes late in a camel coat and dark glasses, even though it was cloudy and nearly evening. She sat without greeting me and took off one glove at a time. "I know you are upset," she said, "but you are making this uglier than it needs to be." I slid the printed contracts across the table. She looked down, then back at me, and her mouth flattened. "Those were administrative placeholders," she said. "You knew I was building." I said, "No, I knew I was loving you." She leaned back, folded her hands, and gave me the same expression she used when vendors disappoint her. "Leon, let us stop pretending this is only about forms." I said no, because you keep offering me a life that is smaller than what I am trying to create. You tune pianos for schools and churches. That is fine. It is honorable. But I need a partner who understands scale. There it was, not hidden inside aesthetics, not dressed in gentle language. Scale, as if devotion needed square footage. I asked whether she had taken money from our account to prop up a brand image she could not finance. She said, "I invested in momentum." She wanted me to co-sign a business line of credit. That was the point hiding under all the emotional fog. She said if I believed in her, I would help bridge the gap until 2 major wedding contracts paid out. She had numbers on a tablet, projected growth, influencer partnerships, an invitation to exhibit at a bridal showcase downtown. She even had a proposed repayment timeline neat and color-coded. I stared at her, suddenly seeing how much of our relationship had been presented in decks and moods and outcomes. "You plan to shame me into financing you," I said quietly. She looked offended, which told me I had finally named something true. I had a choice then. I could have stayed in the conversation and fought for whatever scraps of romance were left, or I could treat the relationship as a legal and emotional separation starting that hour. I chose the second. I chose it because once I saw that she viewed my devotion as usable capital, every soft memory between us had started to feel mortgaged. I told her I was removing my name from anything I had not consented to, closing the joint account, and communicating only in writing. She called me cold. I said, "No, I am just done financing confusion." That was the first sentence in months that sounded like my own voice. The weeks after that were not triumphant. They were administrative and lonely. I changed passwords, moved money, froze my credit, and spent 2 long afternoons in a lawyer's office above attack for Para near 63rd. Ms. Holloway, my attorney, wore square glasses and spoke with the mercy-free calm of someone who had seen foolishness at industrial scale. "You are not overreacting," she told me after reviewing the documents. "You are late, but not fatally late." Those words steadied me. At home, I boxed up Camille's remaining things and stacked them by the door. Boots, frame prints, a drawer full of measuring tape and silk ribbon, all the little artifacts of a woman who had curated even her exits. Work saved me in unglamorous ways. Pianos do not care that your heart was embarrassed in public. They only reveal whether a string is sharp, whether humidity swelled the soundboard, or whether the action is sluggish. I took every service call I could. I drove through sleet to a church in Englewood, where the choir director fed me pound cake while I worked. I spent 3 mornings restoring an old Baldwin in a Bronzeville elementary school, kneeling amid pencil shavings and construction paper, while kids practiced scales badly and enthusiastically. Their sincerity helped. Children hit wrong notes without pretending they meant to. After Camille, that felt like holy company. My mother had been a public school music teacher before cancer took her, and some part of my work had always been a conversation with her. She taught me that care is maintenance, not mood. Tighten the bench screws. Replace the felt before the problem gets expensive. Wipe down the keys, even if nobody notices. Camille had trained me to confuse spectacle with value. My mother's memory pulled me back towards substance. On Saturdays, I started sorting through her old lesson books and the faded business ledger from when she tuned instruments on weekends for extra money. I found her handwriting in the margins. Leave things better than you found them. Meanwhile, the social media chatter changed shape. At first, Camille's version dominated because it was easier to digest. A proud woman rejects a mediocre man. Standards upheld. But public stories do not always age well when invoices start surfacing. Kendra, the bride who would call me, reached out again because floral vendors were saying deposits had not cleared. Then another client contacted me about a missing balloon installation, and another about unanswered emails. My number had become a back door into Camille's business confusion. Each call made my pulse spike. Each call also handed me another fact. Camille did not just reject me publicly. She had assumed my silence would absorb the practical fallout privately. I faced another choice when those clients started asking questions. I could have protected Camille out of old loyalty and said there had been a misunderstanding, bought her time, maybe even kept her reputation intact for a few more weeks. That would have been the version of me she counted on. Instead, I told the truth carefully. I said I was not an employee or partner, that my name had been used without authorization on some documents, and that they should request all financial records directly from her. I did not embellish. I did not insult her. I chose facts because facts do not wake up at 3 a.m. ashamed of themselves. Consequences move the way real consequences move. Slower than revenge fantasies, faster than denial. One vendor refused future bookings without cleared payments. A venue requested updated insurance documentation. The bridal showcase paused Camille's exhibitor status pending contract verification. Her posts grew more polished and more desperate at the same time. Styled shoots, caption affirmations, crop tables from events that looked suspiciously unfinished. People in our community started noticing the gap between her language and delivery. Nobody announced it with a drum roll. They simply stopped recommending her with the same certainty. Reputation, once cracked, does not shatter all at once. It leaks. Around December, I heard she had started seeing a man named Byron who owned a lounge in the West Loop and wore success like a tailored coat. Reggie mentioned it while dusting loose hair off my neck. "Your girl is upgraded, according to the internet," he said dryly. "She was never my girl," I replied, and meant it more than I expected. The news stung anyway because my ego was still tender in spots I had not admitted. But after the first sting came relief. Let him be dazzled by her language. Let him learn what came attached. I was tired of serving as the sturdy wall behind somebody else's mural. Winter deepened. The city got mean and gray. Buses hissed at corners, and every gust off the lake felt personal. I kept working. I started jogging the indoor track at the community center 2 nights a week, not for transformation, just to burn off the static in my body. Dana came by on Sundays with groceries, labeled in masking tape the way our mother used to do. Greens. Tuesday. Eat them, she would say, pushing containers into my fridge like she did not trust heartbreak to remember vegetables. Healing came in those small domestic embarrassments. I hated needing help. I needed it anyway. Camille reached out again 3 days before Christmas. Not with remorse. With urgency. She asked to meet in the parking lot behind New Mercy Baptist after the watch night choir rehearsal because she did not want a paper trail. That phrase alone nearly made me laugh. I almost ignored her, but I went because part of moving on is sometimes hearing the final foolishness in person. The lot smelled like wet asphalt and somebody's fried fish from a nearby carryout. She stood on the security light in a white coat, beautiful and tired around the mouth. For a second I saw the woman I had once wanted to grow old beside. Then she started talking. "This has gone too far," she said. "People are acting like I stole from them." I folded my arms and waited. You know how business works. Timing, float, image. You made everything rigid. I asked what she wanted. She exhaled sharply. "I need you to tell the showcase committee you were involved voluntarily. Just until January. Then my new investor comes through and this all settles." New investor. No apology. Not accountability. Just another bridge built out of my name. When I did not answer, she softened her tone and said, "Leon, do not make me pay forever for one moment." One moment. As if betrayal were a single drop and not a weather pattern. I told her she was not paying for the proposal. She was paying for the paperwork, the lies, the assumption that I would keep carrying what she chose. Her eyes flashed. "You are punishing me because I refused to marry you," she said. There was the rewrite she preferred. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out printed screenshots Rochelle had sent me 2 nights earlier. Group texts, messages with Monique, a note to the photographer discussing capturing the reaction either way, because content is content. Another message read, "If he comes to light, I cannot reward that publicly." My hand shook only a little as I passed them over. Camille looked at the pages and went still in a way I had never seen. Not sad, cornered. Then she recovered and said Rochelle had violated her trust. "No," I said, "you violated mine first." For the first time since October, I saw the whole architecture clearly. The proposal was not a spontaneous rejection. It was leverage. She believed public humiliation would either force me to overcompensate, bigger ring, bigger budget, bigger proof, or position her as a woman too valuable to accept ordinary devotion. In either version, she won. She never imagined I would leave the stage instead of auditioning harder. That was the only reason any of this surprised her. January brought the bridal showcase review meeting, which sounds glamorous until you are in a conference room under fluorescent lights with stale danishes and a panel of tired professionals trying to figure out who signed what. I was not required to attend, but Ms. Holloway advised me to appear because my name had surfaced repeatedly. I wore a navy suit, carried a neat folder, and tucked my tuning fork into my inside pocket out of habit. Strange what you bring for comfort. Camille arrived in Burgundy, composed enough for a campaign ad. Byron was not with her. Neither were her affirmations. Just documents, coffee, and consequences. The committee chair, a florist named Mrs. Janine Brooks with silver locks and no patience for performative tears, asked direct questions in a voice that made lying look exhausting. Did I authorize use of my name? No. Did I ever receive business income from Rain's Occasion House? No. Had I been presented publicly as an operations contact? Yes, without consent. I provided copies of contracts, bank statements, and written notices from my attorney. I kept my tone level because anger can make the truth sound negotiable. Camille interrupted twice to frame everything as an internal relationship dispute. Mrs. Brooks cut her off both times. "This is a paperwork dispute with ethical implications," she said. Camille's confidence broke in pieces, not all at once. First, when the committee compared signatures and noticed inconsistencies. Then when a venue representative produced unanswered email chains about missing deposits. Then Kendra, the bride from December, joined by speakerphone and described paying premium rates for services that did not materialize. Camille tried to turn toward me with that familiar look, the one that used a signal I should rescue the room from discomfort. I stayed still. That was my revenge, if you want a blunt word for it. Not yelling, not exposing her online, refusing before my old role, while the truth did its own work. The outcome was not cinematic. Nobody gasped and nobody applauded. The showcase revoked her exhibitor slot for the season and circulated a notice to participating vendors about contract verification. One venue reported the documentation issues to its legal department. 2 clients demanded refunds. Mrs. Brooks recommended mediation for outstanding balances and advised Camille to cease using any third-party names without written authorization. Camille sat very straight through all of it, like posture could protect her. When we stepped in the hallway afterward, she turned to me with bright, angry eyes and said, "You enjoyed this." I answered honestly, "No, I just stopped protecting you from yourself." She tried once more, a week later, calling from a number I did not know. Her voice came through thin and tired. "Byron left," she said without introduction. I said nothing. He said I bring chaos into every room. I still said nothing because some statements do not need responses. Then she said the part she probably thought would touch me. "I was harder on you because I knew you loved me enough to stay." That sentence settled everything. It was a confession beneath the rest. She had not mistaken my love. She had priced it. I told her not to contact me except through counsel about unresolved accounts, and I ended the call. Spring came late, dirty at first, with thawed sidewalks and city puddles the color of old coins. My apartment felt different without her things. Not bigger exactly, just truer. I repainted the bedroom myself and put the old lamp back in the living room after finding the replacement too cold. I started teaching a free Saturday workshop at a neighborhood arts center called Piano Care for Beginners because kids kept asking how instruments actually worked. The first session had 9 students, 3 parents, and 1 grandfather who nodded off in a folding chair. I left smiling for reasons that had nothing to do with being chosen. One afternoon in April, while finishing a tuning job at a library auditorium in Washington Park, I met a children's librarian named Naomi who wore bright scarves and kept pencil marks on the side of her hand from writing notes there. She asked careful questions about the piano instead of performing. When I explained the difference between pitch and tone, she actually listened. There was no thunderbolt, no dramatic rescue. Just a good conversation near a rolling car return books while rain tapped the high windows. That was enough to feel miraculous. After months of spectacle and damage, simple attention felt almost extravagant. I never posted my side of the proposal online. People urged me to. Dana especially wanted me to air her out properly, as she put it, but I knew public correction would still keep me inside Camille's preferred arena. The people who mattered learned what happened through records, conversations, and the slow reliability of facts. The clip eventually disappeared under newer scandals, newer standards, newer distractions. But I kept the ring box in my workbench drawer for a long time, not as a shrine, just as evidence that I survived a version of myself. The man who bought that ring thought love could be made secure by effort. He knows better now. If you made it this far, then you already know the story was never just about a rejected proposal. It was about what happens when love gets confused with permission to use someone. If you believe Leon did the right thing by choosing facts over chaos, like this video, share it with somebody who needs this reminder, and subscribe for more powerful story-driven relationship dramas. The last thing I heard about Camille was from Rochelle, months later, over catfish and hot sauce at a place near Chatham where the waitress called everybody baby and meant it. Camille had moved back with her mother for a while and was trying to rebuild her business under stricter terms. I did not rejoice. I did not mourn. I simply nodded and reached for my glass. Some people think revenge has to be loud to count. Mine was quieter. I let her stand in the reality she created without cushioning the fall with my silence, my money, or my name. That was enough. More than enough. Actually, the real turning point in this story was not the public rejection at the South Shore courtyard. It was the moment Leon stopped translating disrespect into hope and started writing things down. The ring box hurt him, but the contracts taught him, and the showcase meeting mattered because he told the truth without becoming cruel. That is the boundary a lot of people miss. You do not have to destroy someone to stop carrying them. Sometimes the cleanest revenge is refusing to be used one more day. The end.